what I wanted or my needs or my, relationship, desires even mattered. He was just trying to get a fun, exotic, dominant Black woman to spice up his relationship. Hey guys, it's Kat and it's time for another episode of True Tea. I want to thank you guys so much for joining me again for yet another episode right here on this channel. I appreciate those of you guys who are here every single week with a thoughtful, interesting comment. You guys mean absolutely the world to me. So thank you so much for supporting my work. So I just wanted to say in this video really quickly, just a quick little disclaimer, because I feel like it's important for me to sort of acknowledge this and point this out, and just kind of leave it there. You guys will start to see more sponsorships and things on my channel. This month has been a little bit rough for me, and I've honestly avoided doing sponsorships for a very, very long time. But it kind of is one of those sort of situations where I'm recognizing that I'm just not doing myself service by, taking advantage of sponsorships when it feels right. And it's always gonna feel right to me. I don't ever want to thrust something in front of you that I don't totally believe in, or I don't totally like, or think is useful. So I just wanna put that out there. You guys are gonna see more sponsorships on this channel. If you guys would like to support me, so maybe I have to do less of those sponsorships, I would definitely highly suggest that you guys support me on Patreon. Usually on Patreon, if I manage to finish a True Tea video way ahead of time, it will be posted weeks in advance. And if you would like to, you can find out how you can do that in the comment box below, or the description box rather. So anyway, let's jump into this video. But before we do, I would highly suggest you go and grab yourself some tea. Personally, I am drinking some green citrus tea by Teavana out of my little Starbucks mug, because I'm just feeling, super on brand with my Little Mermaid shirt today. So thought it was appropriate. So let's get into it. All right, so this was a requested video. This is a video that a lot of you guys have been asking me for, and I've wanted to give it to you guys, but to be honest, I filmed it a million different times and I just have never gotten around to editing it. This is going to be the video where I talk about married men and polyamory and why I tend to avoid married polyamorous men. Now, disclaimer, we always have to have at least one. I know that when I talk about married polyamorous people or dating married men in general, some people don't really get it. I am polyamorous. If you guys would like to know more about my polyamory, you can check out, this sort of thing. This means that I believe that I can be in more than one relationship and be in love with more than one person. And that is something that I actively practice. I have 3 partners currently who I care deeply for. So that sort of situation. And by virtue of me being polyamorous, I'm going to date a lot of people who are in relationships. Sometimes those relationships are girlfriend, boyfriend. Sometimes those relationships are husband and wife. And in this video, I'm going to be specifically talking about my particular sort of issue that I've had with dating men who were married. So when I first moved to Los Angeles, I tried to jump pretty quickly into the polyamory community. I definitely wanted to find a sense of community, wanted to find more people like myself, because I've talked about this in previous videos, but when I was sort of figuring out that I was polyamorous, I had this sort of desire to go out into these communities and find a functioning example of polyamory. I felt like polyamory was something that everyone said would work, but I didn't really have any examples of it working in my life. So it became really important for me to find those. Now, I referenced this person on my channel before, especially in my video about liberals. You can watch that video up here. I talk about this person, but when I first moved to Los Angeles, I met this guy at one of my first poly events that I ever went to, and we started to go out. Now, he's a great person to start this conversation out with, because even though our relationship did not end well, he definitely modeled for me what I felt at the time was a healthy poly dynamic. I met him at an event where his wife was at. I met his wife, and his wife also seemed like she was pretty cool. We would always go to these goth events, and we would all sort of be hanging out with each other. and he would have a moment with me, and he would obviously have a moment with her, and we would be able to sort of have this sort of open communication about what was going on, who was doing what, and it was really, really, really copacetic. And I appreciated that I was able to not only interact with his wife, but also have the approval of his wife, because, you know, it's pretty common, as you'll find in some of these stories I'm about to tell you, for men who are polyamorous to not quite get the agreement from their wife about their polyamory. And that's been particularly frustrating for me, because obviously when I'm dating somebody who is in a marriage, especially a marriage where they have children, they're going to prioritize those relationships. So oftentimes when I date married people, it kind of ends up being the situation where even if we have a great relationship, if their wife does something, we have to stop seeing each other. And I found that that is just not a tenable situation for me personally to be in. But the first person I dated, again, it was really, really awesome. And we seemed to all get along. And even though, again, it didn't end really well, it was really nice that we were all able to sort of be in the same space and everything was copacetic. Though unfortunately, he definitely set me up for, I guess, a misunderstanding of the way that a lot of people do polyamory. So I did recently make a video about being polyamorous and married and cheating, and whether or not you can cheat in a polyamorous relationship. And I kind of tell you guys a story about this guy that I was dating. You guys can watch this video up here. The story that I tell is about this guy who I essentially went on a bunch of dates with, and towards the end of it, he had recognized that his partner was not polyamorous. So I'll just summarize it. I met him on OkCupid. Him and his wife were both on there, you know, openly being polyamorous. We went on a date, and it was a pretty good date. And like most dates, it ends with a kiss. And before I kissed him, he told me, well, I might have to tell my wife about that, right? Which seemed very strange to me, because you're on a date. I don't understand what your wife thinks is going on other than us going out and, you know, having a good time and possibly kissing each other. It was a very weird and uncomfortable sort of situation for me to be in, because I thought that everything was communicated, but I slowly found out that it wasn't. So we went on our second date, and I asked him if he had told his wife that we'd kissed, and he told me that he hadn't. And not only that, but he'd also told me that his story that he was giving his wife was that he was just sort of hanging out with a friend. You know, his wife didn't like to go out and drink and things, but he really did. And I love going and checking out the bars and stuff. This was kind of towards the early years of me being in Los Angeles. And so, you know, that was the story that he had told her. Not that we were sort of pursuing each other in, I guess, a more romantic way. And so that didn't feel good for me, but I understand that everyone has their own pace, and he had sworn up and down that he was going to have a conversation with his wife, and so I stuck to his word for it. So we started talking a bunch and flirting a lot and sexting and all that different stuff, going back and forth, and he had really reassured me that he was going to tell his wife that he had kissed me, because of course by his second date, again, he still hadn't told her. And so by our last date that we went on, it became clear that his partner was not comfortable with him seeing other people in a romantic way, to the point where, from what he sort of made it seem like, his wife would have divorced him if she had known that he had kissed me. And that was not what I signed up for. I signed up for being in a relationship with somebody who was married and openly communicating with his wife. And it turned out that not only was his wife not comfortable with him being with other people, but his wife also was not polyamorous. He had presented her as polyamorous, but really what it was that she had been sort of dealing with his desire to be polyamorous and wasn't really on board, but was trying to. And so our relationship kind of didn't end well. And I went on to make, I talked about this on an episode of Multi-Amory, and he got really mad at me about that. And I've made a couple of videos about it now since. So, you know, it is what it is. But I will tell you guys, interestingly enough, that I did see both him and his wife at a poly event fairly recently. So who knows, maybe there's been a lot of leeway made with that conversation, but you know, I didn't appreciate being in a situation where it wasn't clearly communicated to his wife what we were doing, especially because at a certain point he wanted us all to hang out with each other, and I didn't want to be sitting across from his wife being dishonest. That wasn't fair to me. So I wasn't the biggest fan of that, right? So that was my first really bad experience with a married man. But as we've sort of discovered, I need to fall on my ass a couple of times before I really realize that maybe I shouldn't do this, right? And so I started going out with this other guy. Our first date, it was like really intense, right? And I learned about him. He told me that him and his wife had been polyamorous before. The situation they were in is they had a woman that they were both mutually dating, and from what he told me, that did not end very well, right? That didn't end very well, and they ended up closing off their relationship. So they closed off their relationship, and they were just seeing each other for a while, but they had had a lot of conversations and decided to reopen things and to, you know, return to their polyamorous way of living. So I was the first person that he matched with on OkCupid. And we got along. You know, he's bisexual. I had at that point made it really clear that I had a preference for bi men. And so we just really connected really well, and we sort of went on this date. And so everything was going really, really well. In fact, it went so well that he wanted to see me almost immediately after our first date. We had a date on Monday. He wanted to see me on Wednesday, and then we had another date on Friday. And it was just really, really intense. And to be completely honest with you guys, I usually don't rush into being intimate with men, but this was a situation where it just felt right. You know, you ever have those people where you connect with them and you just feel this like really just intense, like, oh, you can't even just explain it. Like physically, you're just so drawn to this person. And that was definitely the case with this guy. And so we were having sex, and it was pretty intense. Really, really good sex. And we were getting along really, really well. And so we were getting along so well that he wanted to introduce me to his wife, but not just his wife, his friends, right? He was having this birthday party, and his wife was going to help put it together. And he wanted me to meet all of his friends. And I had not met a partner of mine's friends, you know, outside of my last relationship. And so I'm sitting over here being super excited about the fact that I'm going to be introduced to his wife and his friends. I just felt like that was really taking it to the next level, even though we hadn't really been seeing each other for very long. And so I was super, 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 super nervous about meeting his friends and his wife, but we got along. We all got along really, 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 really well. And it just felt really good. Everything felt really, really good. We were on the right track. And then one day his wife comes to him and says, "Hey, I've been doing some thinking, and I think that I would be happier if you weren't my primary and I could kind of do my own thing." Now, he had been married to this woman for a couple of decades at this point. They were each other's really serious sort of relationship, and so much of his comfort in pursuing polyamory with other people was that he knew that he had this relationship that he could go back home to, right? He had known that that was a dynamic that, you know, he could rely on and that was grounding to him. He had moved into this apartment that was her apartment, you know. He had sort of really put a lot of himself into this relationship. And so to sort of be told that he doesn't want, that his partner, who he cares about so much, no longer wants to be primaries, it really hurt him. It really, really, really hurt him. And so he was kind of going through a lot of emotions, and we had a date after he'd been sort of told this information, and he was distraught. He was really distraught. And, you know, he had told me, you know, that he wanted to keep seeing me, even though he was really depressed, even though he was going through all this stuff, he wanted to keep seeing me. Now, a problem that I've had is that I consistently think about other people more than I think about myself when it comes to these sort of things. I said to myself, you're going through a breakup, which turned into a divorce because he didn't want to be in a situation where they were not a couple, where they were not together. He didn't want to be in a relationship where they weren't primaries with each other. So he wanted a divorce. And I said, you're going through a lot. I think it would just be smart for you to, take time for yourself and to, figure stuff out. And so we stopped seeing each other, even though we were getting along really well, even though things were going really, really good. And it was what it was, And I said this to him thinking and hoping that, we would be able to pick up from where we left off once he sort of, I guess, has some time to himself. Now, this was a mistake that I made. And I feel really bad about doing this at this point. But at this time in my life, I was definitely I was really overwhelmed by the amount of times that it felt like to me that white women were specifically given more opportunities to be in significant relationships than I was. I sort of dealt with this thing where these men were interested in dating me, but only often felt interested in dating me when they had a foundational relationship with a cis white woman. And I couldn't help but sort of see that pattern of oftentimes these men who were very excited with connecting with me, were only really excited with doing that when they already had a relationship with a more socially acceptable partner. That was something that really got to me, really bothered me, really sort of stuck in my mind. And I guess in sort of disconnecting from him, since we had this really intense connection, I knew that it would bother me if suddenly he happened to manifest a connection with a cis white woman, because I guess my assumption was that we had to stop seeing each other because he was so emotionally distraught. So if he was so emotionally distraught, to have a relationship with me, I had a hard time understanding how he could form a new relationship with another woman. And so I figured that once he's in a space where he can actually take up another relationship, he would just call me. Right? That's what I thought. And I unfortunately communicated all of what I just said to you to him. Right? So we keep in touch and he's doing better. He's sort of this guy who's very nihilistic and self-deprecating. He is a Jewish guy. And unfortunately, a lot of Jewish guys I've dated are literally just like this. Not to say all are, but it's a very common thing that I've noticed from at least the Jewish men that I have dated. Very, very self-deprecating humor, just not always looking on the bright side of things, right? And so, he had been getting a little bit better though, and he was looking for a new place to live because, like I said, he had moved into the place with his ex-wife. And so I was going through stuff and I saw a couple of posts for, people who are looking for a roommate, and I forwarded it to him, and, eventually he ended up getting the place, right? He got this place and everything seemed to be pretty copacetic. And, I kept sort of like nudging and prodding and kind of being like, hey, how are you? What's going on? How are you feeling? Kind of hoping that he would sort of get to this point where suddenly seeing me was viable again, right? And so since I helped him get this place, he offered to take me out to get some lunch, and I agreed, obviously, kind of, I guess in the back of my mind thinking like, oh, maybe this will be like a date, And so we go on our little date. And it's not a date, it's just him getting lunch for me. And everything's good, we catch up or whatever. And like I said, him and I had this really strong thing, right? And towards the end of us hanging out, I kissed him. And he kissed me back, but it wasn't what it was. It was not that sort of electric, magnetic, amazing thing. It was a kiss, and he kind of walked away really fast, and I felt really odd about it, right? But I said to myself, he's still going through stuff. He's still very emotional. Give him time, right? And so I talked about this before, but I hang out a lot with the Burning Man community. And there was this Burning Man party that I was going to go to, and he had also RSVP'd for this party. And so he sent me a message kind of telling me that he was going to go to the party. And he told me that he wanted to inform me that he was going to be at this party with another woman. Now, keep in mind, when I heard this, I was like, well, okay, but I thought you didn't have the time for it or the space for it, or you weren't emotionally there for it, because it was weird for us to have this like really, 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 really intense thing. And then of course it had to go on pause because of his divorce. But I guess I thought that when things picked up again, or when he had the space to do it again, that he would be able to just, you know, jump into a thing back with me, I guess. And so I was kind of hurt, I'll be honest, to hear that he was going to be at this event with another woman, because, you know, I've kind of gone through this really consistent experience of these men saying that they're unavailable, but they're available. They're just not available for me. And he knew this. He'd listened to me go over all of this. And so it really bothered me that he was going to be at this event with this other woman, because, you know, it was, I guess I thought it was something that wasn't possible. Right. And so I'm curious who this girl is, because he says that I know her. And it turns out that it's the woman that lives in the home that I helped him move into. And so, you know, I'm honestly not that jazzed about it, but it kind of is what it is. And one of the reasons why this video has been so hard for me to actually make and publish is because, again, I've often recorded this before seeing this specific person. And almost always it's before going to an event where I know he's going to be there with her. And of course, she is this teeny tiny white bisexual poly woman. And that's just the epitome of what a lot of these men want. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with people preferring that, but it is really hard for me to have these experiences with men where we're getting along so well, we're having this really great thing, and then some white girl walks by and he puts aside everything to give her attention. It's very, 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 very painful. And it would hurt less if I felt like the relationship that I had with these people was not good, if I felt like we didn't have a good thing, if I felt like, you know, this wasn't something that was working. But I've only ever been made to feel as though that it was. And so it's hurt me in a whole other way to be in a situation where I feel like I'm constantly being overlooked for white women. It was and is particularly quite painful, right? And here it is, the realization of my fear, where we got along, everything was great, everything was fine, but this white girl just happens to be there, and suddenly he is now available to pursue a relationship with her. And I've seen them at a bunch of events since this point. And, you know, she presents him as a partner, and he told me that one of the big reasons why he's dating her is because he literally lives with her. So it's kind of like, it's not like he's going out and searching. It's more like she's there and they get along, and it is what it is. And it just hurt. It hurt a lot for me to sort of, because he was the first person at the time that I was like, this is almost like another relationship. You know, he was someone who was really, really close to, for me, being a primary. And to sort of be in a situation where I'm now having to sort of swallow him being in this new relationship with this woman, it's been kind of hard for me. It's been kind of hard for me. But I will say that at this point, I've sort of gotten past a lot of that. You know, we have not been able to spend a lot of time with each other because he lives all the way out there, but we went to get some food a couple months ago, and it was pretty good. But, you know, he's still unpacking his stuff, and I've definitely stopped sort of holding out hope that this is going to be a relationship that, you know, is rekindled. It's not impossible, but I feel like so much would have to happen before he gets back there, right? Or, you know, gets back to being the person who I enjoyed. And, you know, unfortunately, maybe for him, it's going to take him being in a solid relationship with a white woman. who knows, right? So that's one story. So another story I'm going to tell you guys is about this married guy. And this one is the one that kind of really got me. So similar story. I meet him on OkCupid. He's very, very openly polyamorous. There's pictures of him and his wife and things like that. It's great. It's cool. It's awesome, right? He tells me more about his situation. And basically his situation is that him and his wife both work a lot. They work a lot. And he sort of wants to be able to go out with people, but him and his wife sort of have this agreement that when they have time to spend with each other, that they're going to spend it with each other. And because they end up missing each other so often because they're both so busy, his wife was not really comfortable with him seeing somebody that often. You know, he wanted, you know, to be able to see somebody as often as he could, but his wife was not comfortable with, you know, him spending a lot of time with someone, right? And so, you know, back then I was starting to become less like I was at a point where I was becoming less and less invested in this idea of having this like relationship, right? I was kind of approaching dating from like a perspective of like, hey, let's hang out. And if it turns out that we're a match, we're a match, you know? I was not trying to get into a new relationship with anybody because I'd had so many issues, and the issue with the previous guy just kind of really hurt me. And so I just really was not looking to jump into really anything with anyone. You know, so when he told me that his wife sort of had this rule where, you know, he could only really see me like every 2 weeks. Did that sound optimal to me? Not at all. Was I willing to do that because I enjoyed him? Yes. And so we sort of had this thing where we would see each other every 2 weeks, and that was kind of that. Now, this was a guy that he had a lot of resources. He really enjoyed taking me to like very, very expensive restaurants and just taking me around the town. That was sort of his thing, is he was a big foodie. He really wanted to sort of like spend money on me and take me to nice places, you know, and I wasn't gonna complain, you know, girl gotta eat. And so we would have these really, really good times with each other, and we would have just like really, really intense sex, like just whoa, like, so it was really good. And to be honest, well, I shouldn't share this, but I sort of have a dynamic with some of the men that I date. And I try not to enter into this dynamic with people very easily, but him and I fell into this dynamic really quickly, and it was kind of just a lot really fast, and I was enjoying it, having a great time. And, you know, even though we weren't seeing each other that often, I was enjoying myself, right? And so a week comes along, and it's been 2 weeks, and I'm ready to see him again. And so I sent him a message, you know, hey, what's up? What are you doing? We should spend some time with each other. And I don't hear from him, right? And you know, I don't text a lot. I'm not a huge texter. That's definitely an issue with some of my partners, especially my partner in Portland. I don't text a lot. And so I'm not the sort of person who is gonna, you know, be endlessly, you know, what's up? What are you doing? How are you? That's just not who I am as a person. And so, you know, I didn't text him a bunch, but when it took a couple of days and I hadn't heard back from him, I was kind of miffed. So I definitely sent him a couple more text messages like, hey, you know, what's going on? What is this about, right? And so I kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and about a week goes by. And so I sent him like, you know, I sent him a text that's like, look, I had a really, really great time with you. Thank you for showing me all these cool things around Los Angeles. I really wish you the very, very best, you know, good luck with everything. And yeah, you know, bye, basically. And so, you know, I let my phone down, and it's almost immediately I get a text message back from him. Oh my gosh, you know, I was in, you know, Minnesota or Montana, some M state, and he was up in the mountains and he didn't get reception. And oh my gosh, can't believe that he missed all my messages. He's been catching up with messages for da-da-da-da. And it seemed feasible. You know, he travels a lot for work, and he did sort of tell me that he had a trip coming up. It did seem like it was a possibility that, oh my gosh, maybe he had, you know, gotten too busy. I wanted to believe that that's how that went. And that's what actually happened, right? And so I said, okay, cool, no worries. Well, are you free for a date, right? And so we set up another date. And this was a date that was kind of interesting because at this point we had been seeing each other for a couple of months and things were going pretty decently. I mean, with the exception of him not responding to my text messages, right? And so he takes me to this bar, and this was a bar that he apparently was like his old stomping grounds, and it was, you know, a bar where he used to pick women up apparently. And he, you know, he was gonna walk in with me, and you know, he was telling me about this bar, and he told me that he's probably gonna see people that he recognized. And then we had this weird sort of conversation about, well, how do I introduce you? You know, how do I introduce you to these people? Because he's obviously married, but you know, he's poly and people know that about him. So, but how does he introduce me? A friend? What? Da 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 da. And so he asked me, and I say, well, I don't know. How would you like to introduce me? And he was like, well, I was thinking of introducing you as my partner. And, you know, back then it was like, you know, I wasn't necessarily feeling that way about him where I was like, oh, we're partners. But honestly, it felt nice to hear him say that he had been thinking of me in that way. Like, it was kind of a nice sort of sweet thought. And so honestly, I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, partners, okay. And so we go into the bar and we don't see anybody he recognizes. But for me, that was like him communicating that he kind of really liked me and wanted to, I guess, be a little bit more serious with me, right? And so I let 2 weeks pass by. And I text him. I'm like, hey, you know, what's up? Let's hang out. You know, it's been 2 weeks. Let's do the thing. And I don't hear from him. And again, I don't text a lot and I don't want to be a nag. And I think at this time too, I was also busy with my own stuff. You know, I was dating. This was still my serial dating phase, right? And so, you know, I don't hear from him. It is kind of confusing because we just had a conversation about partners and things like that. And he, you know, disappears, right? And so I wait a week, and then a week turns into a month. And he still hasn't said anything to me. Now, I'm trying not to be annoying and message him a bunch. I mean, we're Facebook friends, we're Instagram friends. I see that he's doing stuff, but he's just not talking to me. And so it really starts to get under my skin. And so I do something that I guess I'm not totally proud of. I have a Google Voice number. I've had a Google Voice number since, you know, I was doing shady shit in college. And I thought that it would be a great idea to call him from my Google Voice number because I wasn't sure if he blocked me or what. It just seemed like it was really strange to me because, again, we had this really awesome connection and things were going really, really well. And so it just didn't make sense to me that he wasn't answering me. And to be completely honest with you, at a certain point, I felt like I just wanted answers. I just needed answers. I needed to sort of know what was going on, right? And so I call him on my Google Voice number and he picks up right away. And I say, hi, it's Kathryn. And he's like, oh, okay, well, give me a second, right? And so he's clearly shuffling around, moving around, trying to find a closet to talk in. And so he says, hey, yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you. And I was like, well, you just kind of disappeared. And I understand if, you know, you don't want to see me anymore or whatever, but I just kind of want to know like what it was about because you went from calling me your partner to disappearing on me. Like, what happened? What was it about? And so apparently him and his wife had gone on this vacation with each other and they got into this huge argument. He didn't tell me what it was about, but apparently they got into this huge argument. And at the end of the argument, he concluded that he didn't have the capacity to date other people. He just wanted to be with his wife. Now, what was so frustrating to me about that was that, you know, again, when he was calling me a partner, I was like, no, for that, but this is still a good time. He could have said that to me. He could have communicated to me that, he was having issues with his wife and that he didn't know if it was a good idea to continue to see me. Especially with where I was, I would have been able to say, well, you know, I guess that's just that. And I had a great time, but you know, I guess sometimes it's not meant to be. You know, I would have been able to hear that and be okay. But he did not give me the opportunity. And so I was sitting around thinking that there was something wrong with me, that like he had just sort of used me or whatever, I wasn't really sure what had gone on. But it turns out, you know, they had had an argument, and I would have been totally understanding of that, but he never gave me the opportunity to be understanding of that. And, you know, honestly, that was something that really, really bothered me. And it was another example of understanding that these men who are married, and obviously this is how things should be, it doesn't matter what sort of relationship they have with me. They're willing to drop me just like that to defend their relationship. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but what I recognize is that I can't deal with that. I cannot be in a relationship with somebody who would be willing to not communicate with me because I guess he just sees his wife as more important. I would have appreciated, again, him saying to me, hey, you know, this isn't really something that, you know, I think I can do anymore. I would have appreciated that instead of him ghosting me, right? And, you know, after a couple of these situations, I recognized that it was really vital for me to make sure that the wife was on board, because a lot of these men are not totally telling the truth about the situation that, you know, they're in. A lot of these men are doing what they want to do, having a good time when they want to have a good time, and are not really being honest with themselves first and foremost, but they're not being honest with their wives. And because of that, they're not even being honest with me. And it doesn't feel good to be in a situation where you're potentially a person who could cause, you know, harm and frustration and anger for someone's partner. I never enter into a relationship with a married man wanting for the relationship to break up or for him to leave his wife for me. That's not at all ever who I am, what I'm trying to do, the energy that I'm trying to bring in. You know, I want people to have happy, thriving relationships with the people that they love and care about. I don't want to be an obstacle to that. And it sucks that I've been put into that situation so many times by men who were not communicating with their wives. So I will say that because of my bad experiences, I sort of have this rule with married men where if I meet a married man from OkCupid, I need to have our first date be with his wife, because I need to know that his wife is on board. So I'll go through this really, really fast. But I met this couple at, I met this guy on OkCupid, and I invited him and his wife out to, you know, meet me and talk and just sort of see where things are, right? And so we sat at that table and we had a really awkward conversation for a good 3 hours. He was just really neurotic in person, and it was kind of hard for me to handle. But, you know, towards the end of our conversation, he started mentioning, you know, how he was interested in exploring things with me. And, you know, on all my profiles, I make it really clear that, you know, I'm not really interested in being anyone's experiment. I'm not interested in submissive men. That's not really what I do or what I like. You know, I make it really clear who I am and what I'm about and what I'm not into, right? And it turns out that this guy, when he was talking about exploring things with me, he was talking about exploring his submissive side with me. And I made it so painfully clear that I was not going to be that person who was going to dominate anyone. And we had this 3-hour conversation that ended with, you know, me realizing that what this really was this was again, white married couple who had sort of seen me as this exotic black plaything for him to be submissive to. And it wasn't this sort of situation where what I wanted or my needs or my, you know, relationship, you know, desires even mattered. He was just trying to get a fun, exotic, dominant black woman to spice up his relationship with his wife. It's not what I want. And it's like, what I've recognized sometimes in these dynamics is that who I am, what I want, what I desire does not matter at all. It just matters how he is enjoying his time with me and whether or not his wife is comfortable with that. It's just, I've recognized that at least when it comes to married couples, I cannot do it. I can't do it for the most part. And if I do it, I need to be able to spend time with the wife in a non sort of date kinks poly space. We need to be able to get along socially before I'm like, yeah, I'll date your husband. You know, it's just, it's too much. It's too much and it's too exhausting. And so generally speaking, when I meet a man who's polyamorous and married, I just say that I'm not interested. So anyway, I'm really curious to hear what your guys' experiences are if you have them with being polyamorous and dating married men. I just find that it doesn't work most of the time. I mean, girlfriend stuff is still sort of complicated in a similar way, but marriage is a lot more. I mean, you guys have legal obligations to each other. And so it's hard for me to really be interested in dating somebody who has that degree of attachment to a person. Am I totally writing it off? No, not at all. But do I think in general it's just a safe bet for me to avoid married men? Absolutely. So anyway, I'd love to hear your true tea in the comment box below. So always share it. I always want it. Feed it to me, put it in my mouth, you know? Anyway, right now you're looking at 2 videos you can watch if you want to continue to watch True Tea right here on this channel. I really appreciate those of you guys who have come and joined me this week. And if you got something out of this video, in the corner, you can see how you can send me a tip if you want. I'm pretty broke right now, so, you know, a little bit goes a long way. Anyway, I will see you guys next Tuesday. Talk to you guys later. Bye.